Um, well, good evening, everyone. This is the Monday, January 27th meeting of the Northampton Historical Commission. And as we all know, we can tell this is being done by remote participation. And it is being recorded. So there'll be a record of this that will be accessible later. We always begin these meetings with public comment. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak about anything that is not already on the agenda, we'd be happy to hear from you. And if you do want to speak, please raise your hand and also identify yourself and where you live. And I'm not seeing any hands coming up. So we will just keep moving on. The next item is the chair's report. And there's no chair's report tonight. I do want to ask Hannah, and Hannah, if you're comfortable doing this at the end of the meeting, that would be fine. To give a little update on what's going on in Historic Northampton. Hannah, as everyone knows, is our representative from Historic Northampton. And I've asked her to keep us informed on a regular basis because I think we all need to know about the wonderful things that are going on there. So we'll look forward to that at the end of the meeting.
Sure.
We do not have any, the next item in the agenda is approval of minutes, and we do not have any minutes. So I think with that, we will go right into the public hearing. This is the request for a local historic district certificate of appropriateness pursuant to section 195 of the Northampton Code for construction of a 3-building mixed-use development on the site of an existing parking lot. And as everyone recalls, we did review this the first time at our last meeting. And we are here to look at some updates, some things that we requested at that meeting. This is Sunwood Builders. It looks like Shaw Perry is here. I don't know if there are others representing the applicant. And so everyone, I will just repeat, it's 3 Elm Street, it's parcel 31D-103. Just to remind Michael, Hannah, and Douglas, what we discussed at the last meeting. I think, Douglas, you were able to look at this remotely, am I correct, as a
Yes, I
follow-up?
watched the recording from last month.
Yeah, I saw the form on that. Thank you for doing that. But just to remind everyone, some of the comments that we had from the last meeting were that we were concerned about the sidewalk level and the look of the garage, the look of the building and the parking garage. There were some questions about the retaining wall that were facing the south, on the south elevation that supported the terrace. We were concerned about the view from Elm Street and Smith College, looking east towards the city. Concerned about the windows, windows of the upper stories when viewed from the south, coming up into the city from the south, and breaking up of the State Street facade. So those are the items that we have on our were requested to be addressed. And I just wanted to remind everyone that this is an application for a certificate of appropriateness because this parcel is in the local historic district. We do not have to award that tonight. And I at the last meeting, and I'm still requesting this, I think that we would like to see the final comments of the planning board incorporated before we make a final determination, because this is such an important structure in the streetscape of Northampton. So we want to be in alignment with the planning board and get their input before we make a final decision. There are design standards for new construction, which you all have access to and I'm sure have looked at, so I'm not going to go through those again. But I would like the applicant, Shaw, and it's also Charles, correct?
Right. Yep.
So I didn't see you up there at first. Sorry about that. If you would like to give us an update, that would be great. And then we'll ask questions, and I'll also entertain any comments from those in attendance who are not on the commission.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. We've updated our renderings to reflect the issues that the chair was addressing. So I can walk through the renderings and sort of talk about our thinking um, about the design and sort of the evolution of the State Street elevation, and also some of the views that we've taken from the upper Elm Street looking back towards the town. Hopefully they'll be helpful in terms of assessing sort of the visual impact of the building on the streetscape and on the city itself. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. Is it up on the screen? Yes, I think it is.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So this is that view that you saw earlier in the in the previous meeting, with the view down State Street, Edwards Church on the right, our building on the left. I know that some of the comments about the windows here were that did we want to look at maybe adjusting the scale or modifying these windows in some way? And I think the decision was to leave the windows in this instance as they were, because we feel like it is nice for in these residential units to have light and view out of this corner, engaging the street in a way for people inside the building, and also it becomes a beacon for the corner as well. And it's about it's about life and people living in the city of Northampton, and engaging in a way that doesn't turn its back on the street, but that sort of embraces the street um, and the public. So we left the scale of the windows as we saw them last time for those reasons. Moving up the street, this was where we wanted to talk about how this retaining wall here, for the dining terrace as you come up Elm Street, is actually going to be detailed in stone. So this gives you a sense of kind of the texture of what's going to be happening in here. We're showing an ashlar stone. It'll be something similar to this, whether it's a Goshen stone or an ashlar stone. It'll be a stacked stone as opposed to like a corbelled river rock type of stone. But it gives you a sense of the of sort of the engagement of Elm Street with the dining area and the restaurant, and it steps back from the street, that 30 or 40 feet, but at the same time is very inviting. This would be the pedestrian entrance into the restaurant here, sort of down a sidewalk between the tree plantings and some landscaping in here. So I think that hopefully this gives you a sense of the softening of that retaining wall along the street edge, and it 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 becomes sort of another texture in the building that's interesting. We have the wood timber, framing here for the outdoor dining porch, the brick, the precast lintels, and the landscaping and the stone. So it's a very rich, varied, kind of warm, inviting texture overall in this corner. The next view we have is so this is standing across Elm Street, looking at the rectory here, and at the corner of St. Mary's Church, and our building back in here, which is in the various tones of gray. And so you get a sense of the scale of our building. It's still, from this view, is lower than the rectory. And it also does something kind of interesting, I think, where it becomes this neutral backdrop to the rectory and the church. And it allows sort of the brick and the richness of the detailing of the rectory and the brick to really pop against kind of this neutral gray background, as opposed to kind of getting lost in the clutter of the streetscape behind, in the fabric of the downtown. So in a way, it becomes a very neutral backdrop that highlights exactly the things that we love about these buildings. This is oops, I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. This is a view between St. Mary's Church and Stoddard Hall. I know people were interested in understanding kind of what the impact was going to be from this vantage point. It really is, it's just a view of that corner of the building. It sort of extends to the west from the parking over the parking area, and it's minimal impact. It really, but I think it's helpful to sort of see kind of the approximate scale of this building as you're looking down the the uh, sort of view shed between Stoddard Hall and St. Mary's Church. Oops, once again, wrong way. This is a shot of the existing kind of State Street view that we based one of our renderings on, and I just wanted to point this out. I mean, I know we're all familiar with it. We walk by here all the time, but it's interesting to sort of, see the chain link fence and kind of like the blighted kind of parking lot and cracked pavement. And there really is no sidewalk along here at all now. There's kind of this sort of sloping um, uh, band of grass here that is kind of, it sort of has a path worn into it. It certainly isn't accessible, certainly isn't pedestrian friendly, and there really is no pedestrian access now from the beginning of this property down to the intersection of State Street and Elm Street. And so when we superimpose our rendering over this, now there is going to be a continuous sidewalk. There's the rhythm of the planters, which are also working for stormwater management, and sort of the richness and detail of um, these opening bays into the parking garage with louvers and the precast lintels and the corbelling of the brick, all of which I think animate this wall and give it some life and some transparency. This would be the entrance into the apartments here, the apartment part of the building. And then this is just a kind of a closer in view where you're moving in towards that entrance, the apartment entrance, and giving, some sense of the transparency that we're going to have between the sidewalk and what's going on in the garage. It's not just a blank wall. It has defined openings, it has transparency, and it has kind of a regular rhythm of these bays that are reinforced by the architecture above on the upper levels, as well as the detailing of the gardens and sort of this, some of the stormwater management. And then we have another view. Oops. This is looking south along the State Street sidewalk into the entrance of the building, the entrance into the apartments. And so the entry wall kind of angles in and defers to the sidewalk to in a subtle way, call out the entrance. It's not screaming at you and yelling it over the head, but it's a very kind of nice, subtle slipping into the building that you get here. There's a canopy which will have, downlighting in it to highlight this point and to sort of create, safety and entrance in the evening. And then again, you get this will be, accessible sidewalk all the way down the edge of the street to, I believe this ends kind of at the Indian restaurant, State Street fruit store. And again, just picking up on the rhythm of the garage bays and kind of the detailing we're trying to bring into this building with like the canopy structure and the corbelling brick and the precast. So all of this is to enliven this edge, and it's a very significant building. It's a big building coming up here, and we're trying to work really hard to take something that's like this pragmatic, functional element. It's a parking garage, and let it sort of embrace the entrance into the apartments, and also sort of be an open and an inviting edge along this pedestrian way. And so that that's the quick summary of our updated renderings and our attempt to address the concerns of the commission at this point. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Charles. So the commissioners, you do have questions. I'll start with you, Michael.
Should I stop to share or?
I think you maybe would want to leave that up in case we need to refer to that.
Okay. Yep.
So a couple of things. One of the things was that the comment from Joe Blumenthal led me to look at the design guidelines for the Central Business District Architecture Committee. And I was wondering, this is directed actually to Martha or Sarah. I was wondering, will they be looking at this presentation and passing any kind of input along about this project?
No,
Sarah?
so this project is outside the boundaries of the Central Business Core District, so does not require review under the Central Business Architecture Guidelines.
Yeah, so it kind of strikes me that it kind of strikes me that it's a very interesting lot in the sense that we're being asked to kind of consider it. But when I look at the design guidelines of the Central Business District, I kind of wonder what they would, Central Business District Architecture Committee, I kind of wonder what they would think about the design along State Street. And I don't know if there's any way to get their input on it, because Joe mentioned that their design guidelines, he didn't feel that they had been adequately consulted. And so I just kind of, having looked at them, I kind of see what he means. And I understand that where the parcel sits is not within the CBD area, but it does sort of impact that area. There is a connection there that I think is worth considering. Anyhow, it's something that came to mind for me, and since I don't sit on that committee, I just wondered about that. So
members of that committee could weigh in as members of the public, but the board itself does not have any regulatory jurisdiction over this parcel.
Okay.
And I
All right.
believe Joe is on that committee, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, Joe is the vice chair.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why his comment sort of sparked my interest in taking a look at those design guidelines. And I can understand some of his concerns having looked at them. And it's especially the State Street side that would sort of like invoke a set of reflections about the project itself. So,
Michael, can you just reiterate some of what his concerns were here out loud?
well, Joe's concerns, I think his feeling was that I'm actually drawing from the implications of their design guidelines, but basically they identify 4 types of structures, and one type of structure are thematic structures that fit within the theme of the downtown business district. Another are landmark structures, which are set aside for any particular reason. Robinson Hall would be one of those kind of landmark structures, something that's different from the thematic structures, which is the theme of State Street. Then they have transitional architecture, which are homes that were in the area that are being used for other things than residences anymore. And then there are anomalies. And this definitely falls within their category of an anomaly. And so their concern is not to populate the Central Business District with new structures that are anomalous. Now, that doesn't mean that they would weigh in negatively, but I would really like to know what they think about this in relationship to the design concerns they have, because it sits right there on State Street, right across from the Central Business District. So just say that. And then the other thing is, from our perspective, our concern is, I think, primarily is the Elm Street side, because that really ties into our historic district. And when I look at the third image of the new renderings, I understand what you're saying, Charles, about a neutral backdrop that in some ways is intended to make the St. Mary's buildings pop, but it doesn't really do that for me. It looks like gray fiber cement board all the way across, and I'm not really sure that it harmonizes. And that's just my feeling. So those are two observations that I have.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Douglas, do you want to go next?
Yes, if you could go to this image previous to this, in the renderings. Thank you, Charles. This, my concern is just what Mike was touching on in the relationship of the buildings next to it. And as our guidelines are, I'm going to read from them, reflect and understand of the Elm Street Historic District standards, compatibility of existing character of the neighborhoods. And in the regards to new buildings, a highlight of responding to the context of surrounding buildings. This, with the parsonage right there, blocked by these trees in this view, but in fall and other times of the year, the interaction of the parsonage and this proposed structure, I don't see any of that compatibility or character trying to blend in the new architecture here. And that's important, I think, to try to pull some, as our guidelines are, to have some compatibility with the in context of these new buildings from the other structures there. And if those trees weren't there, and I don't think they can be omitted in a rendering instantly, but that this view would really, there'd be very, very opposed structures, and there's just no blending that I see, and that relationship there is what is a concern for me.
Okay. Hannah.
I guess I could start with a question when I touching on Michael and Douglas's comments. Charles, the colors that you've chosen to use with the brick and the surrounding buildings of the warmth of the brick are pretty cool. Can you talk about how you chose those materials and why, from a historical standpoint, thinking about those colors could make sort of a significant impact with the surrounding environment? So just curious.
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks for that. I mean, there's a lot going on here, regardless, of this building, and there's a lot of texture to the neighborhood and the city in general. And by adding kind of more color into the, into a building like this, in a lot of ways, I think complicates the situation. And by picking these sort of neutral grays, I think it simplifies the building in a lot of ways. It's more of a minimal approach, and then that allows the elements that we are choosing to detail and articulate in brick really pop in more in scale, I think, with the church and the rectory and some of the surrounding buildings. So that was, that's the decision to use a more restrained color palette rather than introducing other sorts of colors. And the other thing is that as soon as you start introducing colors, everybody has an opinion about them. And if we weren't talking about the gray, we'd be talking about the green and the blue, and so, and then if we're not talking about the green and the blue, we're talking about the yellow and the orange and the red. So I think that by kind of reducing the color palette down to something that's minimal like this, it simplifies the conversation and really allows the brick to be the color and the texture and sort of the life of the building.
Right. I do appreciate and understand that point, and I understand it's a modern, much sharper building. I guess I do wonder if a color change, even in exploring the grays that are chosen here, would sort of soften maybe the sharp look that people are reacting to around the other existing structures. So yeah, and the other comment I'll have about the windows is I guess I worry that, and I see your comment and I appreciate your comment about integrating the residential spaces with the downtown and living downtown and what that experience is like for the homeowner or the resident. But I wonder, like, does that mean from a street view, we're looking at people's residential window treatments? Like, I'm concerned that that's gonna be the townspeople's primary view. And there's concern about what that would look like and feel like on those larger scale windows on that corner.
Yeah, those are all really good points. Douglas, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, quickly, while Hannah was mentioning the stone and brick, and Charles, I see the precast concrete lintels above the windows in the building, kind of reflecting and responding to some of the masonry colors in the church in the parsonage, and the gray of that slate roof of the church is significant, and that could blend too in the building's grays. So I do see some start of interacting with the brick and the detailing of the surrounding buildings in the work. So you see that there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, Charles, I would look at is I think that retaining wall, and again, I was wondering, pointing that out last time, that retaining wall, that's going to be a really important feature because it's quite high, especially at the east end. If that gentleman is, nearly 6 feet, I mean, it's a very tall wall. And what gets chosen is the stone for that, for you. So you had mentioned Goshen stone. So Goshen stone is a very multicolored stone. And there are so many lovely colors in it. And I think maybe pulling from that material and weaving that into these very kind of stark grays that Douglas and Hannah have pointed out probably could bring those together a little bit better. That would be something I'd recommend you look at.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Goshen stone is darker. It's a darker stone in general. So it may point you towards bringing those colors, down, toning them down, and that would help. One of the things that I was, I guess, sad about when I was looking at the rendering, not this one, but the one taken from across the street. And I don't know what page it's on, which one of your sheets it's on. Yeah, this one here is right now when you come down, say from the Forbes Library and you're sitting at the light, you can see the old firehouse tower, which is a really iconic structure in the cityscape, skyline, if you want to call it that. And I was sorry to see that go. I think it's probably sort of at the left of the photograph here. Maybe that little spire we see sticking up over the rectory is it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just don't know if there's any way that can be, any of the building could be altered to bring that into it, because it is such an important structure and it's kind of buried now. It would be buried. So that would be my other comment. And then the other thing, what's going to happen to the overhead utilities on State Street? Are they taking the poles down along there? I noticed that in one of those
Yeah.
elevations, existing
Yeah.
addition.
I think so. Shaw, do you want to fill folks in on what's happening with utilities on State Street?
Yes, hi, everybody. There's a telephone pole that services the power lines going across the street towards the parking lot and then going back to the other side of State Street. And that pole along, or there's two of them across, next to the parking lot, those are gonna be removed. There's, by law, I believe could now be a building 10 feet away from power lines.
Mhm.
So the power company has revised the use of the lines through an existing pole on the opposite side of the street. So the power would go below grade from,
Okay.
from the street across to where the parking lot is right now.
Okay.
So I
That's
just
great.
want to comment one quick thing. Typically, we would have window shades that are identical throughout the building. So all the units would have the shades that are matching, which is, to us, an important thing to identify that all the windows don't have, variety of different color shades or what have you.
Hannah, does that answer your question? Yeah, okay, great. If there are no other comments from the commissioners, both
Sorry,
Doug,
yeah.
okay,
One
mind.
more, one quick question.
Sure.
Thank you. I know that the development or reuse of the parsonage is not in this application, but its interaction is so close with the restaurant and patio. Is there is there plans to develop that area together? Would that help understand these buildings' relationships and not to have the parsonage interaction with the patio and the front of the building be a second or tertiary thought, but that whole green space be developed in an idea of and with the final use of the parsonage.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I'll let Shaw talk about that more, but in terms of the comments about these trees, I totally agree with you. These trees, for our next meeting, I'm assuming is going to be one. I'll take these trees out, and because I think and do more of a sort of a lower line of landscaping, because I think it's important for the commission to really understand what the full rectory is going to look like adjacent to this building. But I mean, the idea of developing kind of a coherent landscape out here makes a lot of sense.
And there's quite a bit of space and area there, and for it not to be developed together would just pull it all together very smoothly. Uh, It'd be great to see a plan of that. And that space there could really tie this new building into the existing structures and blend it into Elm Street and the beginning of this district better for us to better for us to see how that will be blended together.
Great comment. Michael?
Doug, that's a really good observation, and it's something that I've been thinking about as well. But I hadn't thought, that Shaw is thinking about both the rectory and the church structure, and it would be interesting to see all of that kind of thought about together in a way that would help us a lot. And would be very, I think, could be very productive to creating a look that would really make the whole project pop as a whole, as opposed to, we're doing this residential structure behind the other two buildings. So that's a great idea. The other thing that we haven't had any conversation yet about the issue that is the one that received the most comments and that we had talked about last time, which is the parking garage and the pedestrian experience walking along State Street. And I do think that's a long walk. And I do think that it's really worth considering ways to rethink it. I can't remember which person thought of like having display windows in there to break things up. Another thing that we heard from comments last time from a neighbor was that he thought that, well, could you pop, a small business in here and there? I don't know. There's just something about that long walk that I think everybody who looks at the design stuff says, well, and Charles, I understand what you're saying. There's a lot of detail there, and there's a lot of ways in which you've tried really hard to create a an appealing kind of textured look to something that's a parking garage. I just wonder if there's something else that could break it up a little bit, given the length of it on State Street there. And that's just to bring that to the table.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem to try and solve. There really is no way to create a practical way to create an accessible, marketable storefront within the space of the garage. So that's kind of like really, that's probably not that would be very difficult to achieve. Maybe there's ways of creating, instead of all these bays being the same, maybe we create some variation, or maybe there's like you mentioned the idea of a display window. Maybe there's, and I've talked about this, of course, with Shaw, and a glazed, almost like a storefront
Right.
that has like, interesting information about the historic aspects of the site and the neighborhood, to try and create something of interest other than just, the rhythm of the openings, which I like, but that's me.
No, I understand, but I do think that idea of some display spaces, it sort of fits in with the sort of kind of larger thinking of what the kind of look of the street fronts in the central business district are like. But it could be for that people would want to take advantage of them to either promote business opportunities that they're working on, or it could be community oriented stuff, like the library could have one of the display windows and have rotating kinds of exhibits that are there. So I don't know, just something along those lines, so that I don't know how you break that up to make it so that you're not just walking along garage.
Actually, as I'm thinking about it, one of the issues that we're dealing with is you need to have open air circulation. And so
Sure.
when you start to block off these, one or two of these bays, you're starting to run counter to the needs of the natural ventilation through the space. So that's something that has to be looked at much more carefully.
No, I was assuming that was going to be an issue. So the question of ventilation is really, if you're going to do like that.
I mean,
Do other garages that don't have natural open airspace have mechanical ventilation? Is that how it's solved when there's no?
Adds another layer of complexity and expense, and fossil, and mechanically, electrically driven, power driven. It's not passive; it becomes an active system, and those comes with operational costs, installation costs, environmental costs. Being able to just do it all passively is or as passively as possible is part of the reason for this. I mean, the other thing is, right now there is no pedestrian experience along this edge, and
Right.
and I don't want to say anything's an improvement.
It's a 1,000% improvement.
I don't want to say anything's an improvement, but this I think is a definite improvement. And I think it's important to view it in that light. And if you look at the other two main parking garages in town, the one by I think it's by the police station over there. Is that Gothic Street? And then
Yep.
and then the town parking garage. The pedestrian experiences in both of those parking garages are very pragmatic, and they're not necessarily a glorious pedestrian experience, but it's town uh, infrastructure, it's development infrastructure, and you see it everywhere in cities and towns, and it's a relative. Yeah, I understand that it is the length of the block, but you're walking along, and next thing you know, you've completed your your journey along the garage, and you're off to your business. So I think it's important to look at this at a granular detail, but also to sort of see it in a larger context of experiencing the city and similar structures.
Yeah, I mean, I would side with you on that, Charles. I think the parking garage, not so much the police station, but the city parking garage, the Gare garage, um, that that edge along, is it Crafts Avenue? That is very, I think it's very, it's something that it doesn't bother people. I guess I would say, I don't think they love it, but you just pass by it and you don't really think about it being a garage. I think one thing that concerns me here, and maybe this is more the planning, but they probably will have more issue with this than I do, but or than we would, is the lighting in that garage. And it's um it's probably on all night, right?
Well, that's a good question. I don't we we showed lighting in this rendering to kind of
Yeah.
enhance the transparency, so you get a sense of the depth, because in our when in the renderings and in the model, just the way light works, it's hard to actually get to read into that space unless you artificially light it. So, that's a larger discussion about how the building is going to be lit. And um uh and I think
Yeah, so I think that needs to be considered. And the other thing too is just the height of the exterior wall. If people are going to be parking up against it on the inside and their headlights are streaming, across the street into the other businesses on the other side of the street, which the height of that wall come up a little bit. So at least, in so many cars today, especially the SUVs, have such a high headlight level. I mean, it's basically like a people's shoulder height. It's so high. Um, is there a way that I would just give that some thought, because I think that could be a problem long term. People would complain about that a lot. So,
so. Yeah. So across the street is the side of Edwards Church, and there's an alley, and there's the fly-by-night
Mhm.
furniture.
By night. Yep.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, this would be in the evening time, usually when headlights would be a problem. So it's an interesting
Well,
question.
late afternoon in the winter. And this
Mhm.
is also the east side of the building, so it's darker.
Mhm.
So it's just something to consider. But
Yeah,
I
sure.
guess I'm less concerned about this facade, but we don't have to agree. I think, you've done this has been a thoughtful approach to this, and it looks like you're using the downspouts to provide stormwater that will deal with the planters. And those are going to be pretty important to keep those healthy.
Right.
So, because it's an important detail on this. So, okay. Douglas.
Maybe go back quickly after thinking it over time. Charles, can you go back to the view from Elm Street and the higher view, and the one next with the trees that were blocking the parsonage, or even this one? You can see the um, one more, where we see, yeah, there. So the left-hand side of the building, where it goes to a gray, again, the viewpoint from Forbes Library and all is so powerful as you stop there and come into town. And I like the brickwork on the front, but to not treat this as a side, but to the left hand or west side of this viewpoint going down parallel to State Street, to treat that more with the brick and the more of a focal point as it is and will be with this large open plaza to the left. Um, so this front of the building and the west side, as we're kind of looking at, to be more in the character of the Elm Street district and the buildings around it, which are all heavy brick, um, would be, I think, a pulling it together more to the neighborhood. Um,
Yeah, I could see that, and we did consider it. And so it's
to
not
basically
something.
treat the west side as a focal,
Yeah,
not as a side.
right. It's something we did think about, and designs an iterative process. Sort of have conversations with yourself and with and with your design team, and and the decision was to leave this as the gray sort of material to emphasize this block here. But maybe there is a way to think about doing this in brick, but not necessarily as detailed as this, so it becomes so it's clearly secondary. I mean, the roof is
Yeah.
lower, and then I could see maybe doing this with the punched openings instead of the larger openings. So that's something that we could, if that's worth looking at.
Charles, can we see the third image? That is the image with the rectory in the front and then the backdrop. So just to think about that. Okay. So the idea that Doug is suggesting here would be that that part on the right-hand side would be brick.
Right.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Another thing that came up last meeting that I think is important in these views is the signage for the restaurant and how that will integrate with the timber frame or faux timber frame structure and the brick material. Because if that's indeed a restaurant, there'll be I think that would need to be considered in the exterior design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would probably be. Yeah, I don't know what it would be. It could be. We haven't necessarily thought about it, but there could
Mhm.
be. There could be. Anyway, anything we do is going to be subtle. It's not going to be. Eat here. It'll be.
Mhm.
But it'll be tasteful and subtle. Probably like. I don't know if it's aluminum block letters or maybe it's something on the stone built into the stone wall. It could be a combination of things. Uh,
Is
but
that something that you all would consider like the branding of the restaurant, like allow them to speak to the sign just to create a space for a sign, or does that want to feel more controlled by you all?
Well, so Shaw, we don't have a tenant yet for the restaurant, but um, right,
Permitted separately.
be permitted separately. So it'll go through a sign permit application, I think, and then I think, and then, but
Yeah,
we can suggest a direction, but uh, would
I
you
guess
would
I
you
just don't really see a place where signage would go. So I guess I don't know. I'm just having trouble envisioning where that spot is. Are you imagining it would be?
um well, let me see. It probably would be something. I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, but
Yeah,
let's see if I can think out loud intelligibly. Get to the right image here. Here we go. I mean, it would seem like if you were going to do a sign, it might be some kind of aluminum or some kind of lettering affixed to this part of the canopy overhang for the porch. It could be a monument sign that's kind of built into the stone wall. It probably isn't going to be anything up high up in here.
Right.
It'll be at or below this horizontal level of the porch, and I also don't think it would be a what do you call it, like a sign on posts or something like that.
A freestanding sign.
Freestanding there, yeah, freestanding would be something. It's something that would be kind of subtle and lower than the canopy of the entry porch, and maybe integrated into the stone wall, or maybe a combination of the two.
Okay.
Douglas.
Charles, were there any, as you talked about this building having the front, the connector, and then the rear piece, were there any development of design of having this front be wider and traveling further up Elm Street, as you do have such availability in the lot to the left?
Um, let me see if I can answer that. We didn't want to close in too much in this area, and we wanted to maintain kind of the sort of like the natural geometry of a residential block. And when you start to get wider, it gets, inefficiencies start to build in to a residential sort of geometry. So I'm just trying to get to
There's a
see if I have
plan view of the whole lot somewhere. Yeah. Um,
um yeah, I could try and find that. Let me
and kind of,
see.
because you can see a little bit in this photo where the parsonage is kind of facing Elm Street, and there's a kind of a curve to that zone to to pull that front of this building around onto Elm Street more. But I guess I see your point
Well,
of overcrowding the parsonage.
yeah, and also we liked the way that this building kind of completes the gesture of Stoddard Hall and St. Mary's Church and the Rectory, and this building as these relatively straightforward rectilinear blocks that kind of fan out along the geometry of the curve from sort of almost like an imaginary center point. And so um, that, and also not wanting to actually crowd the Rectory, and just thinking about you know the optimum geometries for developing the building form and program led us to this solution.
But if I may, I just wanted to go back for 1 minute, which was the focal point of the design has always revolved around the intersection. That's the primary commercial and the primary entrance and focal point of the building. And if you stand in the center of the intersection or across the street and you look at the building, the corner itself has two sides brick to sort of identify the strength of the corner and connect it to the other historical building by virtue of the brick and the details around the windows. And we developed this only to accentuate the relationship with the existing conditions and the other buildings around. And from there on, we wanted to soften, I think, and diminishes some of the, more detailed of the rest of the building. And therefore, we just chose the front of the parking area to be detailed with a brick, and then the main elevator shaft stairs by the entrance. So if you go back and look at the view from across the street, from either the D.A. Sullivan building or the Academy, then you see the importance of that corner, which is going to be where all the most impact of this building. We're looking from the Rectory. The Rectory is the focal point, and our building, particularly with that gray, is a diminishing factor. The other last thing that I just wanted to notice was that in our landscaping plan, which I think we probably can find somewhere in there, there is a row of trees detailing the space between the residential and the restaurant and the rectory. The rectory is more than likely is going to be more like short-term residential hotel, short stay, which would end up being basically, you're looking for some kind of a protection and some kind of a delineation from the residential and the restaurant. And that was, I think, the line of the trees that you may have seen from above, separating the two spaces and the walkway into the restaurant, because the main entrance of the restaurant is from the sidewalk, right by the stone wall. I don't know if we get to see a site plan.
I'm
that
trying,
shows-
I'm trying to,
Oh, there
I'm
it
trying
is.
to, well,
We see a little bit of that.
I'm
That
trying to
tree
find
line.
that site plan. Let me just stop the share for a second and see if I can dig that up.
Shawl, can I ask a very quick informational question? Do you have, I couldn't find it in the plans. What is the height from street level up to the top of the building at the entrance?
Oh, I can tell you what that is. The height limit in this zone, I believe, is 70 feet. At our stair tower, we're 61 foot 6 inches. At the upper roof of the 5th story, we are at 58 feet, and then at the height of the 4th story, before you get to the 10-foot setback, which is what's required by zoning, we are at 45 foot 6.
Okay.
So 45 foot 6, 58, and 61 foot 6 are the 3 heights.
Okay, thank you.
One
Oh,
of
you're-
the
yeah.
one of the things to point out was that the basement side of the rectory, if you were to look at it from State Street, is more or less 14 or 15 feet of elevation from State Street. So that's part of the design idea, is to bury the garage below grade, and then the first floor of residential would end up being more like the elevation behind the church and the rectory. So the total height of the building is, though tall, not as tall as any of these other buildings that would be from the approach of Elm Street.
Thank you.
Are people seeing this site plan?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, yeah. So, there's already getting back to the comment about sort of integrating the rectory and this property. I mean, there's an idea, looks like there's an idea for kind of a rain garden element here, which will work for stormwater between management between both properties. And so there is a sense of like a shared open green space that also it makes clear, the buildings each have separate entrances. There's a separate entrance here to the restaurant, a separate entrance here to the rectory, and kind of like a coherent open green space between the two buildings.
Okay. We need to move along. I want to make sure that we have other members of the public offer comments before we close this, or I should say the commission makes a decision about how they want to move forward. So I do see one member of the public. Is it Benjamin? If you could please
Hello.
identify yourself and, yeah, and where you live.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Benjamin Spencer. I live in Northampton. And yeah, I mean, like think I said at the last meeting, this is really exciting, and I really appreciate the fact that the kind of investment into the city. This is really great to see. And just a couple of things that occurred to me as I was listening tonight. As far as like that retaining wall, directly across the street is Smith College's rather tall retaining wall with their name on it, and it really dominates that corner. So a precedent has certainly already been set as far as retaining walls at that intersection. And then as far as
That is a terraced wall. I just want to point out, though, it's 2 levels, so makes it a
Fair.
little different.
Fair, okay. And then, speaking of Smith College, I mean, I think one of the really fun parts about being on that campus is all the different building styles. There's modern buildings next to very old buildings, next to buildings that have been added onto, and that's part of what makes it such a beautiful campus, I think. So, I personally don't. I think that the building that we're looking at is attractive, and I will also say Charles made an excellent point as far as colors go. I live on Rust Avenue. We're not too far from Metrics, the old Metrics, and the new location for Sunwood and the apartment building, and they went with some great colors there. But Charles is right in that everybody has opinions about colors, no matter what they are, and these colors were chosen. I think they refer to some of the other colors in the neighborhood. I think they're really fun, but of course, people always have opinions. And then I guess other things, just real quick, I don't know if it's possible to do awnings along State Street, but since there's not enough room for trees, providing some shade on that sidewalk, if there's, might be a possibility, and that might also sort of make that facade down low, sort of have more of a historic appearance. Awnings, I think add a lot of character. And then just to go ahead and say this, because there's talk about what we are looking at as we drive into town, and I would just encourage everybody to look at the road as you drive into town and to make sure that we're paying attention to what's going on around us as far as cyclists and pedestrians and traffic. I mean, get it, but look at the road is really what I would say. So thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. Others? Anyone else? No? Yes, it's Garrett. You have your hand up, Garrett? Are you there? You're muted if you're trying to talk. Well, if Garrett doesn't appear,
Sorry about that.
Garrett, okay.
All of a sudden, I was being told the meeting was being recorded, and I couldn't click on the button. I'm curious, probably because I spent a lot of time thinking about this project and composing my comments. I'm curious as to whether the commission has seen them, and I would be curious to hear a response to them. To be frank, I hear you talking about a lot of things that aren't the commission's purview, and I don't hear much talk about compatibility and massing and the other things that are the mission of the commission to oversee. I have been looking at the site a lot and have been thinking about the viability of the project. And I certainly am immensely grateful to Shaw and Sunwood for taking this on with what I believe is an honest intent to keep the rectory and the church standing and find some use for them that's feasible. I do think that the building is very large I think that that is probably an economic necessity. But I want to see much more attention being paid to how this corner, which is really the summation of the historic architecture and the consistently historic architecture along Main Street and going up into the Elm Street Historic District. I really want to see that respected. And I think that I went to great lengths to try and make suggestions that were fairly minimal in terms of the program of the buildings. In fact, I don't think they would affect it at all. But that would, of course, I think, make a great improvement in terms of the harmony with the structures along Elm Street and on the other corners of this intersection. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Is it Patricia?
Yes, thank you so much. I live in one of the old school commons condos where my son John Zachary had his 6th grade classroom, as a matter of fact, back in the day, and love these old buildings. We look right across to this project, obviously, from the Sullivan Building, and it is awfully big, this building, these buildings that you're proposing. I'm very much on the side of Garrett and others who've spoken to whatever can be done to make them more compatible with the historic buildings around them. I hadn't looked at these pictures in slides like we did tonight, which were very helpful until this evening, and I was struck right away by the one where you're looking from the manse, the rectory, down towards State Street. You're looking at where the restaurant will be, and it truly does, from that vantage point, and to my eye, look like a big box store, which to me is not a beautiful and not architecturally in keeping with anything around it. I think have a brick facade probably would help, certainly blend with the view, but that is what I'm hoping. Whatever you can do to modify the design will move it more in the away from that very sharp, very sort of harsh concrete look, which is what it just appears to me as just somebody who walks this area a lot, trying to imagine it, looking at that from photograph. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Are there any other comments from the attendees or not on the commission? I don't see any hands. Okay. Commissioners, we need to decide how we want to proceed. That was quite an echo. Is everyone hearing that echo? Okay. And I just want to respond to one thing about the introduction of new architecture into existing historic areas. I think that one of the things that we have to be careful of is to try to recreate history in our buildings. And sometimes that can be done to an extent where you feel like you have this sort of false recreation of the style that was present, 100 years ago. And I don't think that really does a lot of justice to the existing historic buildings. I think it can actually discredit them. And so I think one of the roles of contemporary architecture is to bring out the historic character of the other buildings rather than to try to, in a sort of false way, reproduce them. So that's said. That's my piece on that. I think the commissioners, we need to talk about how we want to move ahead. And I said up front, I think that we really do need to see this project, one, with some of the comments addressed that we've made tonight, but also after the planning board has looked at it, to be sure that we know what all the planning board is wanting to incorporate. So I would put forth that we delay our decision until those things are accomplished. And does anyone have any opposition to that? Or another idea? Michael, Hannah, Douglas?
I
No?
agree. I agree.
Okay, so Sarah, do we need to vote on a continuation?
Yes, and any continuation would also need the consent of the applicant, since we're starting to bump up against the timeline, so Shawl, you would just need to agree to that. Knowing that it's not sounding likely that you'd be able to get a permit today.
And to point out, if I may, that a continuation to hear out the planning board could be continued by another meeting of the planning board to see the outcome of the historical commission. And from the first time that we met and discussed this project, there was the discussion about how to manage the two separate boards that we're in front of, and which comes first and which comes second, or how does that get? We will never get an approval from the planning board without an approval from the historical commission and vice versa. So I'm just wondering how that this process gets resolved, that we can move forward without further delays.
And I know that the planning board had requested additional information that isn't necessarily under the purview of the historical commission, but that may change the site designs a little bit. So that's why that wasn't able to be added to the last the last planning board agenda. But now it's going to be scheduled in February, so should be wrapped up, or at least have some feedback before the next historical commission meeting.
And we'll be meeting on the 24th of February. Okay. So does that mean we should go ahead and vote on a continuation? Sarah?
So Charles, just to confirm, so the extending beyond the strict deadlines of the Historic District Act, that's acceptable to allow this to move forward in February?
No, but we're gonna have to either accept or not accept if we were to probably choose to end this tonight. So I have no option, but rather see this being extended. And then hopefully there would be some kind of wording within the decision of the planning board at one point to bring in the decision of the historical commission, because otherwise I don't know how I can get this resolved.
Well, so the planning board aside, I from just all of the comments that I heard from the other commissioners and my own concerns, I don't think we are ready to make a decision about this now. We would, I think, if these concerns are addressed on the February 24th, we can take it up again and at that point make a decision. So planning board or no planning board, I think our concerns need to be looked at.
I
Do the
think that,
commissioners agree with me about that? That
yes,
you would like to see this
I
again?
mean,
I think the significance of this project, its location, the district it's in, and the effect on the town, it warrants this process to really thoroughly work this out and because of its significant impact to the city and the town. So yes, Shaw, I understand this frustration of, well, this board, that board, and then like no answer there, no answer here, no answer there. But it's out of the diligence of being conservative in this approach and to understand this project and get these concerns worked out for the city.
Well, and I would add that what we saw tonight were the renderings that we requested, but there was no modification of the original plan. And I thought there was a productive discussion tonight about a number of things. I don't know whether that would lead to any adjustments in the plan, but it would be interesting to know if there might be some thinking about making some adjustments. Like one of the things that I heard that to me was perhaps the most interesting tonight was to think about the way the brickwork versus the cladding operates at the corner there, and whether a change in that might be something to consider, and how that would change the view from Elm Street coming down the hill, so that we don't just have one big gray backdrop, but we sort of are tying elements in. I mean, there are some things that I think Charles was pointing to, some things that could be considered. We haven't seen anything that responds to some of the issues that have been raised. And so I would like to know whether there's any chance of considering some of the stuff that came up tonight before we make a decision. Does that make sense? I mean, I agree with you, Shaul. This shouldn't be an endless process. There should be an endpoint. But I think there was a productive discussion today, and I would just wonder if there's any way in which that might encourage some thinking about alternatives.
Well said. Yeah. Okay, so where are we? Sarah, do we need to vote on a continuation?
Yes, so it would be a continuation until February 24th at 5:30.
Correct. Okay. All right. And we need a motion to do that?
Correct.
Okay, so someone needs to make a motion. Not me.
I'll make a motion to postpone this decision to the next meeting of February 24th.
Okay, second?
I second.
All right, so we need to vote.
So roll call vote on the continuation until the next meeting at 5:30. Hannah,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
and Martha.
Yes.
All right, unanimous, thank you.
Okay.
I don't
Thank
mean
you
to
all.
keep quickly say something to
Thank you
Shaw.
all.
And I don't,
Okay.
it's really where we're coming from is from the design guidelines, as I read earlier. And I'm going to read it one more time, because as from last meeting to this meeting, we're just going with the information of the Elm Street district, and it reflect and understand the Elm Street Historic District standards, a compatibility with the existing character of the neighborhood. And it's not we're just pulling from that, and just we're just looking to see some softening of this project to reflect the neighborhood and the buildings up the street.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, we need to move on. We have another public hearing, and this is in regard to the 95 Washington Street property, Washington Avenue, I believe, map ID 31A-287, to be determined whether this should be preferably preserved. And if that is the case, then we would need to have a follow-up meeting to determine whether we want to place a demolition delay on the property. And I don't, Sarah, do you have the image of this building?
I do. And so Martha, this would be the hearing to determine whether the building is preferably preserved and whether a delay should
Oh, both?
be implemented.
Okay.
Yep. So everything being done at this meeting. And yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize that. Okay.
I just have the street view of it. I don't have a really
Okay.
any information.
Okay.
I have more photos too.
Oh, great.
Okay.
I have photos too, if needed.
So have all of you been able to take a look at this property? Yes. Okay. So we know what we're talking about. I can just quickly, so the things that we consider when we're talking about preferably preserved are three things. I don't think that they're on here, but does this represent a certain style that's significant? Has this been designed by a known architect? Does it to contribute to the streetscape? And I'm doing this off the top of my head. And does it have some sort of connection with a person or persons significant in the history of the city? Am I saying that right, Sarah? I think that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, so those are the significance determinations. So
Those are
the
first part.
so the demo delay subcommittee has already determined that one or more of those have apply, so that now the public hearing is being held.
Right. And I think we were mostly concerned about the streetscape. Yeah. So we have other criteria to determine whether we believe the demolition of this building should be delayed. And I'll just read those quickly. I believe there are 9 of them from my memory. First of all, what is the current condition of the building or structure? How intact is the building or structure? What is the age of the building or structure? Is it an exemplary representation of a certain style or period? And if so, how many of those exist? What is the building or structure's role in the streetscape? Are there exemplary construction elements that embody distinctive characteristics of a period? Does the building or structure yield any important information about history? And has the building or structure been designed by a famous or local architect? And then if it's been removed from has it been removed from its original location? If so, does it still have architectural value? And I don't believe this building has been moved. I think Dylan confirmed that. Yeah. So, could the commissioners have thoughts about this? If you looked at it and the criteria that I just read, what are your thoughts about it? And I'll go around the room. Michael.
Actually, I was hoping to get a little bit more information on it because the amount that was in the items we received doesn't give me much to go on. So, I mean, I know what the building looks like. I know where it's located. I know what the streetscape looks like, but I was wondering if there's more to know.
I can speak to that if I can interject. So the building is in pretty poor condition.
Could you identify yourself,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. I'm Anna Cook, Integrity Development and Construction. The general contractor hired by the owners, Pete and Abby McElroy. So they are looking to have us tear down the house and then rebuild a high efficiency single family home in its place. So the house is in pretty poor condition. That's also noted on the property card, on the assessor's property card. There is asbestos siding, which has recently been remediated and properly disposed of, but the siding's in pretty rough shape. There is vinyl siding on the house, so from, historical perspective, that whatever detail there has been lost. The foundation is very old, would be very difficult to deal with for water management. It doesn't have adequate head height, among like a bunch of other conditions and situations. So there's aging systems in the house. It would need, just tons and tons of work to renovate it, but that still wouldn't correct some of the basic issues of steep stairways, low ceiling height on the second floor, no first floor living, but a bunch of other types of modern features folks are looking for. We did look into, try to do a research on the property. There's no record of it on MACRIS, nothing on the National Registry. I didn't find any evidence of the original architect or builder. Hard to prove a negative, but looked in the places we could to see what we could find. And we're also not aware of any historical significance either of events occurring there or folks that live there or own the home. I looked back through the property records on the registry of deeds, and there was no names that produced anything from a Google search.
Okay. Does that help you, Michael?
That helps me a lot. Yes, definitely. Can I the subcommittee that that met, what was their take on this?
Well, I can speak to that because I was standing in for the committee. I think Dylan also weighed in on it, Sarah, correct? And do you remember what he was concerned about the role in the streetscape?
Yeah, primarily role in the streetscape and just some unknowns about, the history of the structure. There wasn't a lot to be found, but that doesn't necessarily indicate that it may not include some of those criteria.
Yeah, and a couple observations I had about it. It's a very small house in the context of the neighborhood that it's in, which makes it a bit of an anomaly, I guess. I was a little troubled because there had clearly been so much demolition done already before this was even presented to the commission. A lot of the siding had been removed. It just it looked like work had already begun, and so that makes it harder for us because we are presented with a structure that's in the process of being demolished and being asked whether we want to have it demolished or not. Makes it tough. So I also felt that there were probably some original materials in the house that could be salvaged and used in a sustainable way, perhaps both inside and outside. So that was one thought that came to mind. So that was why I wanted it to come in front of the entire commission and not just be decided by Dylan and me, basically. I thought you all needed to weigh in on it.
What materials, Martha, what particular materials?
I noticed there's wood flooring in the main living room. I didn't go inside, obviously. I just looked through the windows. And there's some construction materials on the exterior. I think there's some slate walkways, which those should be kept if possible, reused.
Yeah,
I
so
think.
we do plan to save and reuse the stone on the front steps. That's kind of the only thing of value on the outside that we could determine. So that plan is in place. And I do apologize for the perception that work got started. The siding work was to remediate the asbestos siding and properly dispose of it. And then I was under the impression in order for us to apply for the demo permit, we needed signatures from multiple different boards, which include committees and included water and sewer shutoffs. So we move forward, and all the utility shutoffs. So we move forward getting those things shut off. And the only way to shut off the water was to dig up the front yard to access that. So we did all of that as part of the application for the demolition. And if that could have been done in a different order, I misunderstood that. But we did all that so that we could apply.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the order, but Hannah.
What does the basement look like? Is there evidence of maybe like a lot of the houses in this neighborhood are sort of pre-1820? You can't find a lot of information about them, but some of the materials, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is pretty representative of the basement. Field stone, there are some areas that have been reinforced. This is an area where I'd say the head height is the best. The head height there varies from, I would speculate, like maybe 5'5" at the tallest down to like maybe 3.5 foot tall. So it's a dirt floor, primarily a dirt floor. There are like kind of miscellaneous sections where slabs have been poured.
Thank you.
Douglas, do you have any thoughts, comments?
No, I don't. I've heard of this house and the horrible condition it was in, and have not seen it since the siding was pulled off it. But have only heard about poor condition of the structure.
It was interesting just because I'm Abby McElroy, Abby and Pete. That's interesting only because we were trying to look for some of the, information just to share. You guys probably know all of this already, but we looked at the 41 houses. It's a wonderful street. It's a fabulous spot. And of the 41 houses, I guess they have 6 different categories for the CDU ratings. And 9 of the houses were, excellent. 19 were very good. And I guess 8 of them were good. Average was 3 of them. And I think 1 was fair, and ours was poor. And I didn't even really realize that. I was the one who hoped to save the Goshen stone. There were 3 levels. I kind of felt silly asking, but I went in and tried to find things because we really respect what the committee does. And after listening to the last presentation, it's such a thoughtful group. So we get all of that, but we're trying really hard to figure out how to work with it. And yet we really wanted to build a high, like a high performance, energy efficient home that we really thought would be more aligned with Northampton, the neighborhood, and kind of the future of, trying to have fit with the sustainability goals for the town and state. And we're pretty excited about being able to do that. And you did mention even the size. I think the average size is 2,754 feet. In the neighborhood, our home that we're kind of really excited about is going to be 2,380. So it won't be huge. It is a small property, and we know we want to keep it within scale. I don't know if there's any about the streetscape. I don't know if you want to mention it about it or not. But yeah, thank you for being there. I know it's been a long evening. I feel like we have the runt of the project. I was like, this is pretty interesting.
Thank you for waiting for so long.
Yeah, I was
We
looking forward to like meeting all these people in Northampton. It sounds like an interesting group. So
Here we are.
yeah, I know. Just I'm trying to see if there's anything else we can answer. But we picked Anna very carefully, and the same thing. We were a little like, what did they do? But we knew they had to take the asbestos out. I mean, it doesn't really count the mold and all the other things that we'd have to deal with, but we were a little surprised too, like, whoa. But it was part of the demolition, part of the process of applying. The application process, as you know, is really sturdy and well thought out, but it was part of that process that we needed to remediate before we could put the application in. So
Okay.
well, that was our understanding. I was not excited about it, I would tell you, but yeah, because it's a process.
Okay, so I think we should move ahead on this, and I just want to say, we're in this more often than I would like position of having to deal with these demolition requests, and it's our charge as the historical commission to be stewards of the historic resources of the city. So this is always a very tough decision for us, no matter what. And I appreciate you, thinking about the history, thinking about the scale, thinking about all those things. This is not in a historic district, so we will not be looking at it again. But the planning board will, so I'm sure they'll take all that into account. Does any other commissioners have any other comments? Okay, then I would entertain a motion from someone to either move ahead with a demolition.
Yeah, I would move that we approve a demolition permit for this property.
Okay.
I would second.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we have to vote.
And roll call vote to determine the house not preferably preserved. Hannah?
Yes.
Douglas?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Martha?
Yes.
All right, unanimous.
Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing the next stages.
Yeah, look forward
Thank
to
you very
knowing
much.
you.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye. Thanks,
Thank you.
Anna. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, we have a couple other items on the agenda. It's after 7. I think those DAR accessibility improvements probably needs to be addressed, right, Sarah?
Yes, and there's someone here to talk about that.
Oh, great. Okay, because that application's due, and they're going to want to get that support letter in. So whoever, is it Denise? Great. If you could just tell us a little bit about the project, that would be, I think is everyone familiar with the DAR house? Do they know where it is? And no? Okay.
With my pleasure to tell you, the DAR house is located at 148 South Street. So we're just up the street, and we're part of the Fort Hill historical area. And we are both in the national and state register of historic buildings. I have found through my research, it was built anytime from 1717 to 1753, somewhere in there. So circa 1753, it's old. And the Daughters of the American Revolution purchased it in 1926. There was a period of time when it went out of the Clapp family. It is historically known as the Clapp House. And it went into the hands of an architect Carl Putnam. He was well known in the early 1920s in the area. And he did a lot of work to restore it along with his wife, and then was sold to DAR. So we've been the stewards of it ever since. It is known as our chapter house. It's where we meet, and it is multiple use. We do have an apartment upstairs. And now the current project that, as you all know, with older houses, we love this house. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful old historic home that we want to maintain and restore whenever we have the opportunity. And the catalyst for this most recent project, and this is for an ADA compliance. We think it's overdue for us to bring this historical home into ADA compliance, and we want to do it right. And so another person that's here waiting is Jeff Penn. He's the architect that we've retained. I've sought a lot of information from area historians, and have the support of the historic Northampton, and as well as a number of other places to bring this house up to ADA compliance. And so, yes, long overdue. So the first problem that we had, a concern was, well, this is a small house. There's 3 historic rooms and a kitchen, a semi-modern kitchen. It's old but certainly not as old as the house. And so there was no space for an accessible bathroom. And therefore, we determined, along with my architect, and I'll let him field the more technical questions here. We determined that the best way to deal with this was to put on a small addition. And the addition that we're proposing is on a non-historic wall. At one point during the ownership here, a porch was enclosed, and it's from the inside, you can see on the floor and the walls, it's clearly been an enclosed area. And so that one wall that is not historic was where we selected to put the bathroom addition to. And so it's a little bit complicated. I'd like to see if I can share these pictures. I don't know if the PowerPoint will make it or not, but if you don't mind, I'll take a moment to see if I can show you that. And don't know if I'm able to.
You should be able to. Should be all set.
I'm seeing a share screen on my workplace here. Sarah, is there a way for me to share my monitor?
Yeah, if you hit the share button, you should be able to select any of your application windows.
Okay, the share button that I have here is blacked out. I can't use it. This was the file that I sent to the members of the commission, though. If anyone had received that.
We did not receive it.
Did you send that to me, Denise?
Yes. And it's a short PowerPoint with some pictures of the house, so it's a little easier to understand if you can see it. And while we're looking for that, I think you should know about the catalyst for movement in this project at this particular time. About a year ago, we invited some members of the community to come to our chapter house to receive awards. We're a very, very active chapter, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit. And our charity work extends throughout Hampshire County, but of course centers here in Northampton. And we invited a member of the community to come for an award. And that person never showed up, and it started bothering us. We said, why didn't we not have this person show up? Or they didn't call. It was so confusing. Then we found out that he was in a wheelchair, and we have been devastated since that time. It's not right in this day and age that our beautiful building not be open to everyone who wants to come in and see it. And so we've embarked on over the past year of planning and putting this in perspective on how we might be able to make this work. But that's the catalyst, and that's why we're doing it. It's not because we've been asked to, it's not because we're answering any calls to, it's because we think it's the right thing to do. And so one part is putting on an addition for the bathroom. And our architect has done a very workable plan that I've talked with a number of different architects and contractors who agree that this is a very workable way to make that happen. And then, of course, we need to need to make an accessible path. And we've chosen Monroe Street. It's on the corner of Monroe and South Street. And, you know, South Street's just so busy that we thought having the access into the more museum area would be off Monroe. So the pathway would come off there with legitimate new signage and, of course, lighting, and come around to the door that is of proper size and directly right into our meeting room. The bathroom, the accessible bathroom would be to the left of that. And there are two doors that we would make widen and heighten to all CMR requirements in order to provide full accessibility. We've already been, our builders have already been talking to both the plumbing inspector and the building inspector to ask questions to make sure that we're doing the right thing in our planning stage. And the kitchen itself, the door is wide enough, but not tall enough. And of course, we have to read. Oh, you got it. Oh, awesome. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let me back up a little bit. Here's the plans. And I'm going to stop talking for a moment and let Jeff explain the plans because he's the one who best can do this.
Hi there. I'm Jeff Penn. Apologies, I'm chuckling because I was trying to find a way to share and I'm not getting it to share fully. There we go, a little bit better. So as we've heard from Denise, the building is really discreet. It's completely finished on the interior with quality materials. The front three rooms, meaning the two parlors, the entry, and then the meeting room, which is at the rear, those are very fine historical rooms. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm showing this is the meeting room. At the rear of the meeting room is a wide doorway, but it has an 8-inch step to the grade. But we think that it's really easy to make this an accessible path to the rear on our property over to Monroe Street. At the front of the building, we could also do the same. However, we like the historical aspect of the entry and we don't want to harm it. And at the same time, one of the doorways is about a 1/2 inch out of ADA compliance. If we create this new rear entry and the path to the sidewalk, then the building will serve ADA function. All three of these rooms will be accessible and the kitchen will be accessible. The two features that are currently missing are the accessibility aspects of the kitchen and an accessible lavatory. And so that's why we are adding the accessible lavatory to the rear of the building within within the property line, within our setbacks, facing the neighbor. And then the kitchen, actually within the space that already is occupied by the kitchen, we can reconstruct, create accessible kitchen. Let me see if I can. It's hard to zoom here, but let me see. Well, let me. Oh, there we go. Huh. So, no, it's not letting me. It's not letting me find a focus in here. But anyway, so the kitchen being to the left-hand area here. Again, but not to find a point on it, but we are making it accessible with all of the proper features. On the right-hand side here is our new lavatory, and we are also making that fully accessible. And we've already discussed with the water department, and they would like to see us include the feature of a mop sink. So we've included that as well. So I think that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's without harming the building.
Okay, so I'm looking at the outside, I just have a question about that. So do you have an existing patio out here? Is that what I'm seeing here?
Yes,
Is it
there is.
square?
Yep.
Is it a square patio?
And it basically is from the entry area to the corner of the garage, and it's in stone.
Okay. You may want to make this walkway, it may entail moderating the edge of the patio without seeing what the actual edges of it look like. I would try doing a curve here. You don't, if it's only 8 inches, you don't have a lot of grade to have to deal with.
That's right.
And I would just look at that. That's just a design thing.
Hmm.
No, that's a good point. What we're thinking is we can do this all at 1 in 20 or less in pitch, so it won't require
Exactly.
require
It's no
railings.
railing.
And
You
so
definitely want,
yeah, and so that we think that we can feather the grade off, and so around it we won't have to worry about any fall off area. But you're right, the patio will have to be addressed.
Okay.
And it's flagstone, so they're movable if we need to do
And
that.
you can cut
And we can, sure.
All right. Hannah, Douglas, and Michael, do you have questions about this? It's a little hard to say because you don't know what the outside of the building looks like. Do you feel like you need more information? They're just asking for a support letter from us for their CPA application.
I just looked on Google Maps, and this makes a lot of sense. I don't have any problems with it. I support it.
Douglas or Hannah?
I'm in agreement with Michael. I know we don't have a picture, but I know the site, and I'm in agreement with this as well.
Okay.
Is it
Douglas?
the small addition on the side of this plan view? It's the upper right is an addition housing this bathroom. That's the project.
Correct.
It seems sensible, and I do agree with it also.
Okay. And I do too. So I think that essentially what you need is a support letter, and we don't have to vote on this, do we, Sarah? We don't, do we?
No, it's a sense of the committee would be fine.
Okay. Okay. I think that's good. And I'm the representative to the CPA committee, CPC. And I will, when we deliberate over this, I can share the information of the commissioners with them about our support for it. And that's not a problem at all. So I'm glad you're doing this. You're taking such good care of this house. And we all, know how important it is to the city and then also just the large RDAR constellation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get that out, right away. The applications I think are due soon. I know we don't meet as a committee until the 26th of February, so we'll get it to you we'll get it to them by then.
Thank you so very much. We really appreciate it, and we're very excited about going forward.
Good. It's excellent.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Have a great night. Thank you again.
Good night, Jeff.
Good night.
Thank you.
All right, we need to move along, and I think we should move some of these items to the next meeting since it's going on 7:30. Sorry about that. The other things are the pending National Register districts, which we can report on at the end of February. I think there's no problem doing that. We can also talk about the CPA projects later. Sarah, tell me if you disagree. And the only other thing that I want to be sure, and again, we can do this at the next meeting too, is we need to vote on a chair and a vice chair, and also a appointment of one of the members to the Central Business Architecture District or District Committee. We have not had representation on that committee in many years. I can't remember the last time we had representation to that committee. And so we would like to, fill that role if we can. So think about that. And that's a committee that only meets when necessary, right? Is that right?
Yeah, they typically only meet a few times a year as needed.
Yeah.
And does that committee serve a function of similar to this committee, but in the downtown district?
Yeah, so they review projects that require Central Business Architecture Committee review. So projects within the downtown core district that involve architectural changes.
Yeah, and that core map probably is on the city website, so you can see what it is.
I'm familiar with that core.
Yeah, okay. All right, great. Does any, but, and, you know, Hannah, I had asked Hannah's good to report. I mean, you have two minutes if you want to update us. You maybe talk about the slavery project, because that's pretty interesting and it's in process.
It is very interesting. I'm here at Historic Northampton right now. I'm sitting
I
at Betty's
thought that was your
desk.
bag. You said what's going on there today, so.
Yeah, yes. A 4-part series is the biggest event that's happening because the museum is closed for winter recess right now and closed to the public, but there's an online lecture series that's happening right now about slavery in Northampton. It's a 4-part series. Dylan and Betty, the director of Historic Northampton, participated. It was fantastic. I think that was last week. And then the second lecture is going to be on I think it's February 18th with Jennifer DeClos, she's part of, I believe, she's gonna talk about slavery in the North. So she's a professor at Smith College. It should be great. And that's sort of the biggest event that's happening. And I guess I could also say that a new exhibit is in the works, and they're going to replace the main exhibit hall with a slavery exhibit. There's 58 enslaved people in Northampton, and they want to have all of them represented here in the museum. So that's an ongoing, I'll be able to report out on the progress of that exhibit. So it's exciting. Yeah.
Well, very good.
Yeah.
It's short.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if everyone, you do Historic Northampton website, you can get information about signing up.
Yeah.
If you haven't. So okay, great. Anybody else have anything else they'd like to share or talk about before we go? It's late. And hopefully we'll get through the new project at the next meeting.
So
Yeah.
quick question on the course of events. So we're gonna see what the downtown development district has for the State Street project. What
No,
information?
so this project is not under the jurisdiction of
Oh, yeah.
that committee at all. So members
It's-
can weigh in as individuals if they want to, but there isn't a role since this isn't within the central business architecture core district.
So
So
what information are we expecting to come in from the planning board? Is that what we're gonna pull information from to make a decision next month on this project?
Yeah, and I think also they need to address some of the things that we brought up to them, at least consider them. Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things
Not to be a rule stickler, but any discussion about the project should be within the confines of the public hearing.
Great. Okay.
Which we're out of at this point.
Yeah.
Should we draft a letter or something to them, or am I stepping out of the bounds of what should we? It seemed like they didn't really know where to go. Or what's the next? I guess my question is, I guess we need to wait to see what they repropose if they've heard any of the input of tonight's meeting.
Yeah, and they're meeting before the planning board sometime in February. Has that been set yet, Sarah?
I believe it has, but I don't know if it's
Okay. They're meeting twice in
I believe
January.
it's the 13th. I think it's the
I do think that it was pretty clear that one of our concerns is the way the rectory and the church and the new construction tie together within the the look of the Elm Street district. And I just hope that we see something that responds to some of those comments. So I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I don't know. I'm not trying to discuss the project outside of the context there, Sarah. I don't mean to say anything more than that, but I do expect that maybe there'll be some thought around that. There was a lot of good discussion, I thought.
Should a letter be drafted of a summary of topics for them to address, or for them to work out?
And I could summarize it in an email, but I think the applicant and their consultant heard some additional points that the commission was looking for.
Yeah, so it's their responsibility to figure out what to do next.
Yeah, I mean, they may decide that, you know, they've thought about it and would like to move forward with what's proposed, or may make some modifications.
And Sarah, just so we're clear, the planning board, you and I talked about this earlier, the planning board, I guess one thing that Shaw brought up that I guess took me back a little bit is how he felt as though the two boards were not really in sync, and they didn't know who was actually the final arbiter. I guess that's it. You know, is the planning board looking to us? Are we looking to them?
Yeah,
And
I don't think either one of those is correct. So, you know, the historical commission has its items that it reviews in its jurisdiction, and the planning board is looking at different items, and there may be some overlap, or there may be.
Right. Okay.
And is it, am I proper to understand in the Mass General laws, without this board's approval, the project can't move forward? Is that, or is this an advisory board? Or
Oh, no, this is a historic district permit, so the
Yeah.
local historic district, which you are as the historical commission in Northampton, needs to issue a certificate of appropriateness or a certificate of hardship for any work proposed within the local historic district.
And if we decline that, they can appeal it, right?
I do have to say, and I don't know whether this breaches the bounds that Sarah's trying to set around.
Just for due process issues.
I understand.
The commission shouldn't be.
This is a very unique project being sited where it is on the edge of the Elm Street district, and you know, up against the central business district area. So there's a way in which some of it makes me feel like that can be an opportunity to get away with things. And I think we need to be very serious about the historic district and how this interfaces with the historic district. So I hope I haven't breached the bounds by saying that.
I think that's assumed, at least by us. And I think we all are taking this seriously. I think that my concern was more about the process and the protocol, like how to make sure that, I guess that the planning board isn't relying on us to be the final decision maker, because we're not. I mean, they have their own things they have to decide about that we have nothing to do with, and vice versa. And so we have to focus on what our decisions are, our guidelines that are, published. We have to look at that and focus on that and see if they're adhering to what we believe is the way those guidelines should be interpreted.
And if, for example, just as a new commissioner, if, for example, by the end of next meeting, we don't feel like we've come to a conclusion, do we vote? We just keep pushing this back? I mean, it seems like there's some pressure to move this ahead.
Yeah, of course.
The commission really shouldn't be discussing,
Okay.
the application process or the merits of it without the applicant here outside of the hearing process.
Okay. Even the process?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. At least we're still in the meeting. At least we're not like outside on the sidewalk. Sorry, Sarah. Okay. Well, I think we should probably end this, and you're all welcome to attend the planning board meeting. We just need to find out when it is, because they'll meet twice next month. So it depends on when it's on the agenda.
Yeah, I believe it's the 13th, but I'll have to double check, and I can
Okay.
let everyone know.
All right, so I'll hold that in my book. And they do meet in person. So
when was that? The 10th, you said?
I have to
13th.
I have to
Oh,
double
okay.
check. I believe it's the 13th, but I'm
13th.
not entirely sure.
Okay.
thank you, Sarah, for all your
Yeah, thank you.
guidelines and your
Sorry, but-
leadership, so to speak.
it's really important. This is a tough one.
It's an important one
getting
too.
more and more
so-
complicated in the years I've been on this. It's like more complicated now than it's ever been. So it's good though. It's good. Keeps us on our toes, right? Okay. I will entertain a motion to preserve to
Adjourn.
adjourn. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Night.
night.
Much everyone.
Thank you.